What's up, everyone? This is Keith. We're going to talk about attraction models today. Why is it that two people actually pair up? This video was inspired by a Jordan Peterson seminar I was watching. Someone in the audience asked, how do I strike a balance between physical attractiveness and moral character? I wasn't a big fan of Jordan Peterson's answer. That was a little fluffy. Don't want to focus on his answer, though. I just want to focus on what that question presupposes and then how I would answer it and what I think is the correct attraction model. So the question presupposes that these different factors that we consider in attraction are competing against one another. You can give a certain amount of consideration to, say, personality, worldview, finances, looks, whatever, and all of it put together, it's kind of a zero-sum game, to use an economics term. If you add one, or add more of one, you've taken away some of the other. So I call this the pie chart model of attraction. So what you'll see is something like somebody saying, half of my consideration goes towards worldview, half goes towards character, and then, a quarter goes to worldview, a quarter goes to character, and then, a quarter goes to personality, and then an eighth goes to finances, and then like a 16th goes to looks, and then another 16th goes to hobbies or something like that. This is a very, very common way to think about attraction. And the reason people do this, I think, is mostly to virtue signal. They don't want to come across as shallow. They don't want to say, I'm highly preoccupied by looks. That's a major consideration, a major factor. So when you present attraction like this, you can diminish the importance of looks, finances, whatever, and claim that what you really care about is character, worldview, etc. And they might even try to quote Proverbs 31:30 in support of that, which says, charm is deceitful, beauty is fading, but a woman who fears the Lord, she will be praised. They'll point to that and say, see, looks are shallow. They shouldn't be factored as highly. I'm not one of those people that factors looks real highly. The problem is this doesn't describe how people, including women, including Christian women, actually behave in dating. So, for example, a guy will be at a church, he'll meet a woman who has the same socioeconomic background, same worldview, their personalities mesh just fine, they even have some of the same interests, and she just completely friend zones him. But, if you interviewed her, what really matters to you, she would probably never mention looks because that's shallow. But looks are what explain why he got friend zoned. So here is a better way to think about attraction. I call this the threshold model. And let's say that we're on a track, and here is the finish line. All right, and in order for someone to cross the finish line, which would symbolize a proposal or accepting a proposal, they have to cross a bunch of thresholds, or using the track analogy, hurdles. So there's the first hurdle, and I would say that this is typically looks, and then there's another hurdle right here, and let's say that's something like finances, and then here's another hurdle, and maybe this is location. Somewhere in here we'd add worldview, of course. That would have been earlier on. I'm sure most people have bet on that earlier, but just for sake of example, I'll throw it in there. And then maybe this is another large one, but it kind of comes a little bit later once you get to know the person. And that would be character. And then another large one would be personality. but it's hard to vet for that right up front, so it's a little bit later. And then, later down the line, they're going to get to know your family, and they're going to decide if your families are compatible. And then later down the line, they're going to get to know what your life goals are, or your hobbies, things like that. How many kids do you want, blah, blah, blah. So this model is way, way better for numerous reasons. First of all, it lets us actually order the different factors. I would say the most significant one in terms of ordering is looks. I do think that looks is typically the first filter we put people through. There's nothing wrong with that. That's completely rational. Why would you take the time to get to know somebody's character, personality, family background, goals, blah, 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 if you know you'd never want to be in a sexual relationship with them? So I think this is completely rational, normal. And also I'll say that if you are putting yourself out there very aggressively and you're not getting any dates at all, it's probably a looks issue. You're not even getting over that first hurdle. Men or women are basically saying we don't want to take the time to get to know these other aspects of you because you're not crossing our first hurdle. So the ordering is part of the advantage of this model. The other advantage of this model is that there's no competition. Like, I could make all of these hurdles very high if I wanted, or I could make one of them high and then the rest of them very low, or I could even remove hurdles if I wanted. And we'll talk about that more in a moment when we talk about compromise. The third advantage that I want to talk about here, though, is that you can easily make the hurdles different sizes. So I recognize that some people do have a higher threshold for looks than others, and some people do value whether the personality meshes more than others, or whether the family meshes, etc. So all of that's adjustable. It's not adjustable within the pie chart model. So going back to the question, what's the balance? How do you strike a balance between physical attraction and moral character? Well, there's no competition here. You just make them as high or low as you want. Now, if the question then becomes, I'm not finding a person who can clear both of those hurdles, then what we need to think about is, how high are the hurdles that you're creating? Are there any hurdles that you can remove? Do you need to go somewhere else and look for more people that might be able to clear these hurdles? There's a few options there, but I'm gonna talk about myself as an example of this. When I went back into the dating pool in my late 30s after my divorce, I was a divorced dad. I wasn't a spring chicken anymore. And I still had pretty high standards in certain areas. So I had to be very thoughtful about which other hurdles I kept in here and how high they were. So for me, what it came down to is I'm just going to completely remove the location hurdle and the hobbies / shared interest hurdle. And that was different in my 20s. In my 20s, I was only interested in dating somebody who was within a day's drive. And I was also highly concerned about whether my spouse shared my deep love of apologetics and philosophy. Those are two just areas. Oh, and theology. Those are 2 or 3 areas that I'm really passionate about and I love. And I wanted an intellectual companion who also enjoyed those, and we could have long discussions and conversations about those topics. Well, I quickly realized I was not going to find somebody within the Pacific Northwest that was able to clear all these hurdles and was attracted to me, or at least was so attracted to me that I was beating out the competition. So I completely removed the location hurdle, the shared interest hurdle, and that's how I ended up engaged to somebody who's literally on the other side of the globe in the Philippines. It takes me 35 hours to get to her. She's absolutely amazing. She leaps over the hurdles that I did keep in place. And those hurdles were things like I wanted her to be Protestant. I wanted her to be a certain level of attractiveness and at least 5 years younger than me. And I wanted her to be more feminine. I wanted her to be interested in traditional household. So she leaps over the hurdles that I kept in. And in your case, you need to be asking yourself the same question. Because here's what happens, and here's what I see in the Christian dating subreddit quite a bit. Somebody will come into the Christian dating subreddit, and it might be a person, let's say a woman who's 25 and her age range is like, 22 to 30. Let's say she's a little younger than that. Let's say she's like 23, 24. And her age range is like 22 to 30. And she wants somebody who's conservative, evangelical. And he needs to be high moral character. He needs to be practicing his faith. Maybe she wants him to have low body count, as they call it, or even be a virgin or something like that. Let's say that she lives in an area with 4 million people. Metro area. So typical metro area, you can probably cross it in 2 hours. That's kind of the size of the area we're talking about. Say we're dealing with a metro area with 4 million people. That's a good number, right? Surely she should be able to find somebody who has these values, right? So if you start with 4 million, and this is really general, I don't know exactly what US city she lives in, it's going to vary, but conservative evangelical Christians, I would say in the US are roughly about 15% of the population, those that are actually practicing. So 15% is going to take that down to, I think, like 600,000. And then let's say, well, obviously she's only looking for men and they need to be 22 through 30. That right there is going to wipe out almost 95% of this number. So 1/10, that'd be like 60, let's say just very, very roughly, we're down to 30K after we've applied just 2 filters. But hey, 30K, that's still pretty good, right? All right, well, now let's start talking about looks. Let's say that he needs to be above average looking. So a 5 or higher, that's going to be 15K because, bell curve, 50th percentile, it's right in the middle. Let's say that he also has to be over 5'10". That's going to take it down to like 10K roughly. He can't be overweight, so he has to be like below 20% body fat. That's only 20% of the male population. So now we're down to 2K, and then you see how this is working. We're going to start adding in things like particular denominations and body count, and he never looks at porn, and he has a particular interest that you share. I don't know. You can see how it's really easy to end up with a situation where you have like 100 people left in a metro area with 4 million. But wait, there's more. You're thinking 100. Well, she just needs to find one of them. She's only trying to marry one of them. She's not trying to marry all 100. Okay. Well, here are the other questions. Out of these 100, do you even have access to them? How are you actually going to find them? What if she's one of these women on Christian dating who says, I refuse to use apps. I had a bad experience on apps. She emotionally overinvested and she got burned. So she was like, I'm done with apps. Okay, how on earth is she going to find them? Is she going to start going around to all the different churches in the area and taking usually the weeks or months that it would normally require to get to locate these men? Then beyond that, are they interested in her. In other words, it's not enough that somebody clears your hurdles. Are you clearing their hurdles? And let's say that she only clears the hurdles of 20% of them. Let's say that she's only found 10 of them, and then she only clears the hurdles of 20% of them. That would be 2. We're still not done. What about the competition aspect? Other women are competing for these men. Is she more desirable to these men than the competition? And so you can see how it is completely possible within a population of that size to come to the conclusion that you have 0 options. The answer is because you actually do. You actually have 0 options given your standards and the effort you're putting into finding people. So we might lament this and say, my parents didn't have this struggle. My grandparents didn't have this struggle. They could just go to the local town dance or whatever, which, by the way, that's actually how my parents and my grandparents met. My maternal grandparents met at some kind of hoedown in a rural town in Ohio. Met one another when it was like a Saturday or something, not school hours. And also my parents met at a university in a dance class. So yeah, there was a time where you could just go to these events, meet someone who was in your socioeconomic background. You didn't have to do a lot of vetting beyond just personality. They were probably of a similar worldview to you. That's not the world we live in anymore. And you can lament that and be upset about it. And we can talk about why that's the case and pontificate and complain about society. But at the end of the day, it is what it is. So I'm the type of person that wants to just take action, get practical. It's a famous quote by John Brown, the abolitionist. He famously said, "There's way too much talking going on. I want to see action." So here's what action looks like. First of all, your location. I was giving an example with 4 million people. Imagine if you're in a, quote, small town, unquote, that only has 100,000 people, which I was raised in a town of 4,000 people. So even 100,000 people seems very large to me. If you're in Podunk, Iowa or whatever, and there's nobody within 2 hours of you, it doesn't matter that 80% of the population shares your worldview. The chances of you finding someone are quite possibly extremely low. So you might have to move to another metro area, a larger metro area, or you might have to open yourself up to international dating, which is what I did. And so I didn't physically change my location, but I was targeting another location. I was using an app that targeted Filipinas. It was literally called Christian Filipina. So very effective if you want to access, obviously, Filipinas who are Christians. So that's the location element. And that also implies LDR, by the way, which a lot of people say, I refuse to do LDR. And it's like, well, okay, then you may be refusing to get married. So location, and then cast a wide net. So this ties back into the access point. How are you going to access these people? This very small number. You say, I'm only going to show up in church, or I'm only going to talk to friends and family and get referrals from them, or I'm only going to go to my Wednesday volleyball night. I don't know. I don't know if that's good enough for most people. For highly attractive people, it might be good enough. I know a few people. I went to a Christian college, by the way, which is like an incredible place in terms of location. But I'll still say the only people I know who never got on apps, never really had to put much effort into dating were highly attractive women. And Then the casting a wide net aspect, that will include apps, that will include, events, getting referrals from friends or family, churches, making yourself known, even going to your pastor, your elders saying, I'm single, I really want to get married. Do you know of anyone? So the more of these you shut yourself off to and say, I refuse to do it, the worse your access is going to be to that very small number of people. And then lastly is self-improvement. So going back to the topic of, that very small people, are they actually interested in you? Well, you're going to increase the chance that they are interested in you if you self-improve, especially in the area of looks. Looks is a big one for both men and women. For men, finances is also very important. If you are working a minimum wage job and living with your parents, that's not a great look for a lot of women. But I would say if you really want to hit one hard, focus on looks, focus on lowering your body fat. I always recommend about 15% body fat for men. 13 to 15% is the sweet spot for men. And then for women, you want to aim for like 24 to 26% body fat. That's really good. That's where most people are going to be at their peak aesthetic. And it's totally sustainable. Those aren't crazy body fat percentages. You can easily sustain those year round. Increasing your looks is going to move the needle more than anything else you do. And some people will say, well, if I become better looking, I'm just going to attract more bad actors. Well, you're also going to attract more good actors. That's the reality. That's the way it works. That's also why I think it's important to post pictures when you post an intro on the Christian dating subreddit. There's a lot of great guys, a lot of great women on there who they just kind of casually scroll the subreddit. They're not going to take the time to read your wonderful essay you wrote about your testimony. If you want to catch their eye, you got to put pictures on, and you have to, of course, meet their looks threshold. So posting pictures and getting pro photos, I always tell guys you should definitely get pro photos, is very important. The financial aspect, getting out of debt, things like that. Social confidence is very important, which can come through practice, things like that. So this is the action. This is what you can do to increase the likelihood that you're going to find the people in that very small pool. Because the only option, if you're not willing to do this or put in more work in this area, then the only other option is to lower your standards. And again, in my case, I wasn't willing to lower my standards, at least in those most important hurdles. Like I wasn't going to lower my look standard. I wasn't going to lower my character standard. I also was pretty determined to find a woman who had a very strong relationship with her father. So, I wasn't willing to compromise on those. So at that point, it just becomes this becomes the focus. And that's why I tell people, you need to start viewing dating as a multi-year part-time job, because that's the effort that average looking people are typically going to have to put in to find what they want. And then I think the last point I want to make is, no, actually, we'll just end it there. What I want to say is I've worked with about 70 people in the Christian dating subreddit in determining whether their dating goals are feasible, because a lot of people are confused about their hurdles, about the effort they're putting in. They're wondering, are my dating goals feasible? And if you don't know where to start, you can reach out to me, DM me, message me, whatever. My Discord is in the description below. I'm happy to do a dating feasibility analysis for you. I can do a very simple one for free, or if you want a more robust one, then I can do one that is paid, and I'll basically write you an entire report on whether I think your dating goals are feasible relative to your standards, relative to what you bring to the table. So with that, I hope it was useful. I hope you understand attraction better and how people actually pair up. And of course, like, comment, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.